Most people think Tolkien settled it with a single line. They remember the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, the darkness rising, the fire within it, the terrible presence that seems larger than the space it occupies. They remember reading the words and thinking, there it is, proof, wings. And yet that same sentence has kept readers arguing for decades. Because one line in The Fellowship of the Ring didn't just describe a monster, it split Tolkien's audience into opposing camps, each convinced the other was missing something obvious. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Balrog wing debate is not really about wings. It's about what you believe language is doing when it stops being a report and starts being a spell. If Tolkien meant those wings literally, then he quietly broke the internal logic of his own mythology. And if he didn't, then generations of readers have been arguing over something that was never meant to be solved in the first place. Which means that if you think this is an easy question, if you feel confident answering yes or no, you are already standing on one side of the bridge. By the end, the real reason this argument refuses to die will be clear, not as a verdict, but as a revelation. Because this debate is a mirror. It tells you how you read, how you imagine, and what you demand fantasy owe you. So let's go back to the bridge, slowly, and ask the only question that actually matters. When Tolkien writes wings, what is he really giving you?
Act 1. Why this question refuses to go away.
On the surface, it sounds trivial. A piece of fantasy anatomy, a fandom curiosity, the kind of argument that feels too small to matter. But J.R.R. Tolkien does not write small questions. He writes pressure points. And this one touches something deep, because Tolkien's narration is not a camera. It is a consciousness, limited, frightened, dazzled by fire and shadow. He does not describe monsters the way a bestiary would. He describes how they arrive in the mind. When readers treat Tolkien's prose like a technical schematic, something breaks, because his sentences are not instructions, they are experiences. This is the first mistake most people make in the Balrog debate. They assume that if Tolkien uses a word, it must name a stable object. Wing equals wing. But Tolkien's language predates that instinct. It belongs to myth, not manuals. He is far more interested in how something feels than how it functions. And that raises a question we need to hold open, because everything depends on it. Did Tolkien want you to see the Balrog clearly, or did he want you to feel overwhelmed by it?
Act 2. One sentence, two armies.
Everything begins with two passages from the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. First, the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. Then, moments later, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall. To many readers, the second line feels decisive. Tolkien says, its wings, not like wings, not as if. So the conclusion seems obvious. But others read the first line and hear something else entirely. A simile, an image, a way of describing the shape darkness takes when it fills a space. Two readings, two certainties. And what makes this debate so vicious is that both interpretations feel natural, because they emerge from different assumptions about language itself. One camp expects clarity. The other expects resonance. And neither side is arguing about a Balrog. They're arguing about what words are allowed to do in Middle-earth. So instead of picking a side immediately, let's step back and ask a calmer question. When Tolkien uses the word wings elsewhere, what does he usually mean?
Act 3. Wings as poetic force.
Tolkien gives wings to many things that clearly cannot fly. A horse can have wings upon its feet. Ships can have black wings. A land can lie beneath wings of darkness. Even Sauron's power can be said to grow wings wide enough to cross the sea. In these cases, wings are not anatomy. They are scale, speed, reach, inevitability. They describe what something does to the world around it. Wings are one of Tolkien's favorite ways to make something feel larger than its body, larger than the frame that tries to contain it. So when the Balrog's shadow reaches out like two vast wings, Tolkien is doing something very familiar. He is letting the mind supply the terror. Still, the objection remains. Tolkien gives literal wings to eagles and dragons. Metaphor elsewhere does not automatically mean metaphor here. Fair enough. So let's return to the bridge itself and look not at isolated words, but at how the scene behaves.
Act 4. Back to the bridge.
There is a tempting argument that the Balrog scene moves from vagueness to clarity. At first, the creature is hard to see. It seems larger than it is. It is wrapped in shadow. Then, so the argument goes, Tolkien reveals its true form. The wings emerge. There is even a parallel elsewhere in Tolkien. A shadow like great wings passes over the moon and then becomes an eagle. So why not here? Because the Bridge of Khazad-dûm is not structured like a reveal. It is structured like a tightening noose. Notice what Tolkien chooses to specify. He tells you about the whip, the fire, the mane, the dark form within the shadow. But he never gives you the one thing that would end the argument forever. He never lets the Balrog fly. No unfurling, no beating wings, no sudden mastery of the air. And when the bridge breaks, Tolkien gives you a line that quietly reframes everything. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. Not its wings, its shadow. And at this point, most readers feel the itch, the need to fix the problem. If it has wings, why doesn't it use them?
Act 5. The problem no one likes.
The Balrog falls into the abyss of Moria. Later, from the peak of Zirac-Zigil. Earlier still, in ancient tales, Balrogs fall into chasms with Glorfindel, grappling, leaping, swaying like earthbound giants. Each time, the same question returns. Why not fly? You can invent answers. Non-functional wings, stunned wings, too narrow a space, too much obsession with Gandalf. But every explanation adds machinery. Every fix makes the world less elegant. And here, Occam's razor whispers something simple. The problem may not be that Tolkien forgot the wings. The problem may be that they were never meant to be solved. Because Tolkien does not build monsters to be understood. He builds them to be endured. But intuition is not enough. Tolkien left us something better than speculation. He left us his drafts.
Act 6. Midpoint turn. Watching Tolkien think.
If you want to know what an author meant, don't argue about the final sentence. Watch them write. In early drafts of Moria, the Balrog is described with surprising clarity. Man-high, long arms, flaming sword, many-thonged whip. It runs, it leaps. There are no wings. Then Tolkien revises. He makes the creature harder to see, larger in effect than in form, and with that change, shadow enters the description. Then appears the key line. The shadow about him reached out like two great wings. The wings arrive first as metaphor. Only later does Tolkien add the second reference. Its wings spread from wall to wall. So what changed? Either Tolkien silently redesigned Balrogs, late, without notes, without consequences, or he found a powerful image and allowed it to echo. Christopher Tolkien, who knew his father's process intimately, was clear. He never believed the second mention meant anything different from the first. At this point, the question stops being textual and becomes philosophical.
Act 7. What Tolkien is actually doing.
The Balrog is an exercise in restraint. Tolkien resists the modern urge to clarify, to diagram, to domesticate fear by defining it. Instead, he lets the Balrog remain partially untranslatable. It is fire and shadow. It feels larger than it looks. It fills space the way storms fill skies. When Tolkien writes wings, he is not giving you appendages. He is giving you the shape fear takes when the mind tries to understand it. The wings are not something the Balrog uses. They are something the darkness does. And once you see that, the argument changes. Literal wings would make the Balrog smaller, more specific, more manageable. Metaphorical wings let it remain what Tolkien needs it to be, a presence.
Act 8. Why this argument will never end.
So why does the debate persist? Because it sits on a fault line. On one side is the desire for a world that behaves like a simulation, consistent, legible, rule-bound. On the other is the desire for a world that behaves like myth, where ambiguity is not a bug, but a feature. Tolkien refuses to choose for you. He gives you enough to ignite the imagination, and then he steps back. And the moment you demand clarity, the spell weakens, which is why this debate will never die. It isn't about wings. It's about whether you believe Middle-earth exists to be mastered or to be felt.
The shape of fear.
So, do Balrogs have wings? If you were hoping for a verdict, you won't get one here. Because Tolkien didn't write anatomy. He wrote an image. A shadow that spreads like wings. A darkness that presses in on space itself. And perhaps the reason this argument endures is that both sides are defending something real. One side defends the need to know. The other defends the power of not knowing. And Tolkien quietly sides with the dark, because the moment you can draw the monster clearly, it stops living there. So the Balrog remains on the bridge, not a creature with a diagram, but a darkness with a shape. And if you still feel the urge to argue, to decide, to settle it once and for all, ask yourself what you're really fighting for. Not wings, but the right to tell Middle-earth what it must be. And that leaves one final question hanging in the air. If Tolkien's greatest horrors are deliberately left half-seen, what else have we mistaken for a missing answer that was actually the point of the spell all along?